Hello, Fabio. How are you?
I'm doing very well today.
I'm glad you're coming back. My guest today is Fabio Botarelli once again for part four to talk about a very, very important issue to him as well as myself, and that is emotional intelligence for students with special needs. Now, you say special needs. And I say students with disabilities. And I wondered if we could even address that. Is that an old term that you use? And or is there a reason why you say special needs as opposed to students with disabilities?
I like to say special needs because it's all about language. I think that, needs, the way I say, the reason why I say special needs is because it makes it seem, it just makes it less traumatic because you don't want to, no one wants to be reminded of like something that's lacking. It's like disability just seems like something that's lacking, like I'm not good enough, I'm crippled. It's like you might as well go that route. But needs means I just need a few things in order to be at my best. It's like I need provisions, like you need, like, as if you're going, hiking. You need a food, you need a backpack, you need a tent, you need marshmallows. That's what I mean by special needs. Like you just need what you need to go on a camping trip with. It makes it sound less dramatic, and it's more encouraging and better for the morale of the students. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, I want to apologize to you for having used disabilities in the past, students with disabilities in the past. I checked and I checked on whether that's the current term that people use, and they said yes, and that special needs was an older term. But I wanted to check with you and see how you felt about it. And I appreciate your response. And I kind of agree with you. It's hard sometimes to choose terminology that is just right or makes people feel fine as opposed to less than, which is something that you're addressing with students with disabilities, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so let's get back to emotional intelligence. What do you mean by emotional intelligence, and why is that a point that you want to develop in your curriculum, did you say?
Yes, that's something I think that should be developed in curriculums. Just pretty much all across the country because we're never trained or we're never taught how to handle our emotions. We either are trained to feel ashamed of them, we're trained to deny them or repress them. But the problem is that all three techniques are severely outdated, and they just it's when I think of emotions, I think of energy, because it's just natural as breathing. You feel things, you have a reaction to things. And a lot of people just kind of don't understand, like, it's just emotions are just a natural part of who we are, and they just need outlets. They need healthy expressions, and especially when it comes to negative emotions. We always are forced, I think, to put a fake smile on our face, and again, that's part of like a repressive strategy, for example. And I'm like, no, if you're feeling disappointed, that does not mean you have to like scream or shout or go in a crazy rage. It just means there's different ways to express it. Like for example, I'm just not in a good mood right now. You kind of let people know, like, okay, you're being honest, and you're like telling them, all right, I just need some time to process things. That's a perfect example of like when you're not feeling good, and it should not be frowned upon. You got to be honest with yourself. Like if you're having a hard day, you got to let people know, like, look, this is tough for me. Like I'm having issues with this, or because also it gets people on the same page, like, okay, how can we, make these emotions less taxing for you,
Yes,
make it less of a burden.
yes. And so did somebody teach you to express your emotions? And at which point in your life did you start doing that?
Unfortunately, this was way after college. This was when I joined the Mankind Project when I was 27 years old. It's a men's support group. And again, I had to wait till I was 27 years old when I finally got what I call the necessary education to at least deal with it, or at least be made aware of these kind of issues. Because a lot of us, because again, and I said this, like with certain things, it's gender specific. Like for example, with guys, expressing emotions is a very like it's a minefield. Let's just say that, you forget you if you cry, you look like a fool. You have to keep things in, and the only emotion you're allowed to is anger, and even that has to be very regulated. So it's like you're kind of like on a narrow spectrum when it comes to expressing emotions if you're a guy. And if you have learning disabilities on top of that, well, that's a whole nother issue to work with. So again, you know, it's just the thing is that, and the thing was because of that, because I was not given that emotional intelligence, it affected certain good habits I want to cultivate, like for example, sleeping earlier, exercising. When you don't know how to deal with your emotions effectively, you sometimes quit good habits or you don't stop bad habits. Like one of my bad habits I had in my 20s was I would consume too much sugary snacks. I had a sweet tooth since I was a kid, but when you become older, you start to put on some weight, and your metabolism is not as doesn't burn the calories as quickly, and it can be an issue. So, and I used to be a former long distance runner, so for me, putting on weight, at that time was like, oh boy, I got to do something about it. And it turned out like I was pretty much eating my emotions, so that was a big deal. And if a former long distance runner could put on weight and have a stomach, well, then you can imagine what the average American goes through when they when they have emotional issues, or they're not taught how to deal with emotions. But yeah, because one way you cope with not knowing how to deal with your emotions is you start eating too much or not enough, or you eat the wrong foods, and it's like it's just an unconscious habit. And you're always in denial. You're like, oh, I'm fine. It's just I'll have that extra. I'll have that extra burger, or I'll have that milkshake. It's like no big deal. I'll feel better afterwards. That's the key. I will feel better afterwards.
Yes. How about this whole issue of eating your emotions? How would you change that in your curriculum for special needs students?
Well, first of all, I'll make them aware that, one of the reasons why, because dietary issues are also a thing what special needs students struggle with, because a lot of them they need extra help dealing with their emotions, because a lot of them, for example, they're what you call, they're like I would say a misunderstood minority of people, and like any misunderstood minority of people, you're going to have extra issues with negative emotions. You're going to feel, sadness, anger, depression at a much higher rate than the average student. So,
Because of your special needs, can we take that apart? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is really rich and you're very articulate. So, my concern in my work is to minimize the wounding that happens to students who may not be able to perform like other people, like other students in class. Can we try to unpack it in terms of why, what students with special needs feel and why it's two strikes against them? And do you agree that there is wounding happening in class? Do you think that there is educational trauma? And if you were to describe it, how would you describe it?
well, first off, most kids growing up, but even to this day, most kids, when they're put in special ed, it's because they got the message that they couldn't cut it in a mainstream school environment.
And
So
that hurt,
that hurts. It's rejection. That's what it is.
right?
It's like I'm not good enough, or they don't want me, you
Yes.
know. So that's why like a majority of when I was in special ed, a lot of us had behavior issues as a result. We would act out. where
Yes.
we'd shut down
Right.
because we would act out, be like, okay, you're probably going to think less of us anyway, so we might as well be extra annoying, or or we're just not going to bother trying, you know. So
Oh,
that's like two, you know, that's two sides of the same coin, right there.
okay. So there is a question. Was that voluntary? Was it intentional? Or did it just happen as an adaptive behavior to kind of cover up the hurt?
It was purely adaptive. I remember when I was a kid, when I would alternate between the two, either I would act out once in a while, or I would just shut down. In my case, I mostly shut down. And then you
Okay.
had other kids that would act as a class clown. But mostly I was the shut down kind. Like I was so quiet, I would not look at the teacher. I would not look at anyone. I would just look down at my desk or try not to make eye contact with anyone. I pretty much gave off the message like, I don't know if I could trust you. I don't know if maybe, should I listen to you, or should I not listen to you? Do you really know what I'm thinking? Do you even care? It's just that's really goes through like a lot of these students' his head. That's why it's very important. You got to kind of, as an instructor, you got like, you can't just let the kids drift. Whatever they're doing, whether they're acting out or shutting down, you don't want to let them drift and stay there because then it becomes a pattern. And special needs individuals are more so than most people are creatures of habit. We're even as an adult, I'm a person of habit. So that's why it's important to like kind of start off with encourage good habits early on so that they stick with it because once a special needs kid once they're you put them on a good habit they just accelerate. It's like a sports vehicle. They just pump them up and they go right down at 100 miles an hour and they know how to make those turns. But you have to get to that part first. You got to get the engine going. So that's the key.
All right. So let's take it apart even more. Okay. So you were saying that it's adaptive behavior, but was it conscious on your part to say, I'm going to misbehave, or did it just come to you?
It was for the most part unconscious.
It's
I didn't have
involuntary.
involuntary. I did not have the mental sophistication to kind of have that kind of awareness of my behavior at that age.
Right.
So it
What
was
age are we
completely
talking about?
unconscious. Uh, about about like kids like either acting out or just shutting down
What age were you talking about just now?
when I was in elementary school.
Elementary school. Okay, that would be first grade,
Yeah,
kindergarten.
kindergarten. Yeah, kindergarten through like in my case it was mostly kindergarten through fifth grade. Yes,
Okay.
for the most part.
Okay. Okay. Understood. So, as you know, I'm an integrative learning specialist, and that is my population to have children who are learning delayed or have learning differences, but some of them have significant behavioral adaptations. They don't even respond to rewards. And they're so reactive that it's hard to decide, do they want to be left alone, or do we try to lean into the feelings that they are having? Because if they are so upset, they might not even know why they're upset or find the words to express it. Does that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, I kind of the thing is I was very happy that I had good teachers that kind of brought me out of you know my dream world, I would call it, because I would always retreat into fantasy land. That's what I called it.
Yeah.
My dream world. And you know, I remember like some people would say like, Earth to Fabio, like, we are, we're here at Earth, like, or be aware of what's around you. But again, like to me, it was like, okay, Yeah, but what's around me is may not exactly be the safest part for me, you know. Maybe
Right.
I don't want to be, it's like, so, if pretty much if you want a special needs child to be part of the real world, you got to make that real world safe and approachable. You got to make it less hostile. You got to make it seem like not maybe not so different from their dream world. I think that's a good way to start. You kind of make it someplace safe where it's like it's a safe part where it's like, because the problem is once kids feel too safe in their dream world, it could lead to addictive behavior. They may spend too much time in front of a screen because then they'll really drift in, especially with technology. Like when I was born 87, so we just had, television and black and white Game Boy at the time. But kids today, they have iPads, they have cable television, they have thousands of channels, they have computers, they have
iPhones,
iPhones, they have way too many screens.
device.
So yeah, if I was able to, you know, take up a lot of time on those screens when I was a kid in the 90s, it's nothing compared to the time these kids could have in front of a screen. How much more time they could take up. It's like literally they can't run out of options. It's infinite.
Yeah. So, Fabio, let's keep going with this. So, you had a fantasy world. What did it consist of? May I ask? And you don't have to answer. What did it consist of?
Oh, inconsistent of something really magical. Like I remember, just encounter like let's say I was in a one of the board games I loved playing as a kid was Candyland. And
Oh,
as I mentioned before, I had a sweet tooth. So sometimes I would imagine myself in Candyland as a main character, and everything was made of candy, and I could eat as much as I want. And I literally had unlimited appetite. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have this house full of fudge. And now let me go to the swimming pool full of fudge. Actually, no, the house would be made of chocolate, and the swimming pool would be made of fudge, so I could drink it. So that was one of my fantasies I had about Candyland. So it would be very, or I would dream about being on the beach. Being on a nice beach, sunny weather, because my mom was French, so as a family we'd go to the south of France, and there was beautiful beaches there. So I love being on a beach where you have the ocean breeze and ice cream and just very soft sand. But it could be part of it. It could be like based on not just fantasy, but also based on really beautiful places you visited in the past. As I just mentioned.
right, right. And so, in our previous interviews, you had mentioned that you wish that somebody would ask you, well, what is your fantasy world like? Or why are you going there right now? What's so scary over here? Can you elaborate on that? And how in your curriculum would you propose to create greater safety? Because it sounds to me that most of your schooling was done in small teacher to student ratios, like 12 students in the class. So, how could that have been made more safe or safe enough for you?
Well, again, like I would have loved if I had an instructor that would have asked me, where do you like to go? Like, where do you like to kind of drift off? Like, describe it and even turn it into a little learning project. Like maybe write a short story about it.
Okay.
Because to me, like I love. There's a lot of kids, but like, that sounds like a good idea. Or maybe if they like, or the kids in the computer science, maybe they could create an animation. It's just because these kids have special needs kids have wonderful creative fantasies. They have very high creative IQs from not just based on the kids I grew up with, but also based on some of the kids I teach. They have really phenomenal imaginations. Really, it's really special when you really get to know them, what the ideas they come up with, and it's so much untapped potential right there
Yeah.
from an early age that you can just kind of dig into. And the thing is, you just got to ask, like, and not in an intrusive way. It's very important you use a certain tone, but like, be off curious, like, what's it like? Like, where you off? Where are you off to? Like, what's the journey? Like something fun
Right.
and also like when I teach chess to my students that special needs, I make it look like that they're going on a wild adventure, like a little like we're going. It's like I call it like chess story time.
Oh,
That's what I like.
nice.
Yeah, chess story time. Like, yeah, it's this like if I'm going over teaching, how to move a queen, for example, it's like we're gonna go over the story of the queen and her journey to the other side of the chessboard, like those kind of things. And the kids love it. They eat it up because they know I speak their language. That's the key. I speak their language. Like, oh, because kids are naturally creative. They love to be they want to explore their creativity. I think all children, but especially special needs kids, they love to explore their creativity. And if you can make every subject, even a common core subject, you add that little bit of creative magic to it. It's amazing what you could get out of a student.
All right. So that is really valuable information that you are providing me. And I'm trying to contextualize it within a classroom setting. And of course, the specialized schools that you were in, they have their own people there. So I'm just wondering how I could incorporate it into the classroom settings that I'm in, which are mostly general ed. And then the students with special needs have an IEP and I work with them. But the expectation in those classes is that the students follow the schedule. And that's a big if and problem because there is this transition, and with that is the ability to move from something that they are very comfortable with, a preferred activity, to something that they have to do. And so if the student tunes out at that point, what would you suggest that teachers do?
That again, it's very important that you stick with it's very important, I think. Yeah, you want to stick with the curriculum. You want to make sure that the kid is able to learn this skill set at a certain level by this grade. So I'm not going to deviate away from that, because even though I teach chess in a creative way, for example, I want to make sure that they learn the skill level by the end of, for example, this trimester or this semester. I don't deviate away from deadlines. I always make sure that by but I always think that you could always add creativity. You could always make a lesson plan creative.
Mhm.
And I feel that, you know, I forgot the study that was done. It's like when you learn things in a fun way, your memory does less repetitions. Like you don't need as many repetitions for your mind to remember the information. Because it's all about long-term memory. At the end of the day, it's long-term memory. And most adults, they forget most of what they've learned, like throughout their educational years, because quite frankly, most schooling in the United States is very boring. The way they approach a subject, it's like they just try to cram information in there. So they make it look like a forced process, not a natural process. It's like it's like you just don't learn when you have that kind of pressure on you. I just feel that it may help in the short term, but it does not help in the long term. I think the mind naturally does not like being overwhelmed. I think, when I study chess, for example, I make sure that I'm in a pleasant environment. I have calming, peaceful, you know, nature playing music on, and then I'm studying chess, and I retain the information so much better that way than if I was playing in a noisy environment, or if I was someone was shouting at me saying, "You gotta do this, you gotta do that." I'm like, no, 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 no. It's just not going to work to that same extent.
I'm smiling because, of course, you and I, we met at the cafeteria of Barnes and Noble on Union Square, and there you were studying your chess moves, and it's one of the most beautiful coffee shops. So I get that with you, and I think you're saying something very important, and that is to make space for learning, to clear space both in terms of your emotions inside so that they don't clog everything up, and your thoughts in your brain, or the fear that you may experience for whatever reason that doesn't allow you to actually reach those parts of your brain involved in cognitive activities. I mean, it's a biological thing. If you're in survival mode, you're going to be distracted because you're programmed biologically to get ready to run away or to fight or to collapse, go into conservation. That's the polyvagal theory. So I agree with what you just expressed, it completely naturally based on your experience. And and so can you recall a time when you were in whatever grade where you or another student was unwilling to transition? What happened there and what helped?
Well, some students get visibly frustrated when they don't understand something right away.
Yeah.
And so what I do is that's when I have to spend some one-on-one time with that student. I ask questions. Of course, it's all about the tone you use. Like you don't want to be intrusive. Be like, okay, oh, what's this? Like, for example, like, okay, what's it that you need help with? Like just be like, okay, I'm here to help out. Like, have any questions, or you need like, is there anything I could help you with? You're offering your services, your support, and of course, once you have that approach with a kid, they're like they warm up to you, like, oh, okay, this guy's here to help me. He's not here to judge me. That's
Okay.
the key.
Okay. All right. All right. So you and I, we also spoke about this emotional intelligence program to be, or curriculum to be developed in tandem with the academic program. How how would you set that up? Would it be like sex education, where it's um it's a project that they come and then present and then they leave? Or would it be on a weekly basis, on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis? How would you imagine that? What do you think the students, how do you think the students would benefit from from your program of emotional intelligence?
Well, number one, they get to understand themselves. They get to come back to themselves. That
Okay.
this is very, very important. Like they no longer feel like, oh, I'm the only one who feels this way, or I'm the only one who has this issue. Because that's very important. When you feel that you're the only one who feels a certain way, you become alienated from everybody and your entire environment. I think human beings, even introverts and people that are just don't like to spend a lot of time with people, we all seek a kind of connection. We want at least one person in our environment to at least get us partially. It's very important. We are a social species at the end of the day,
Yes.
even the quiet ones. And to feel that, to when you bring attention to something like, wow, I'm not the only one that feels this way, it first of all, it removes the shame, which is great. That's the key. If you could get rid of shame, that you just knocked out a complete, big obstacle out of the way. That's a big one.
Oh, thank you for that, for bringing that up, because it is a real burning emotion that can just attach itself to whatever situation based on your past, right? Is there an experience that you've seen or experience that you felt that you could share with us about how shame came up or how shame was eliminated by a teacher? What did they say?
Well, I, well, in my case, for example, once in a while I take my students to chess tournaments, and I go there voluntarily, so just to provide emotional support, yes, and also to review my students' games. But one of the reasons why I do that is because these the students playing against mainstream students, like so I want to get them out of their comfort zone, and a lot of most of my kids that special needs kids that play in tournaments, the hard part for them is the emotional aspect of being in a chess tournament. You're competing against another child across the board from you, and losing hurts a lot more for them because, again, they want to feel that they belong. And no one knows how to, for example, help them deal with the negative emotions or the anger of losing a chess game. Because I'm going to be frank, losing at a one-on-one activity is far more stressful than losing in a team sport because it's all on you.
Sure.
You have to accept accountability. It's like, it's me.
Yeah.
I did this. I made this bad move. I made this mistake or this series of mistakes. It's like, why did I do this?
Yes.
And and it's just helping them understand. It's like they're forced to face the fact that there's a situation in life where things don't go your way, where you can give 100% and not get the result you want. And how do you react to that, or how do you process that? That's why I always get my students to a point where they play in chess tournaments where it's like they're forced to deal with the emotional aspect of learning.
And
And
how do you
also,
support them when they fail?
uh,
Lose.
I tell them like, well, first of all, I always reassure them like, oh, compared to myself, you're actually a saint. I was much worse, which was true actually. I don't even have to lie about it. I was horrible, when I was I at least I was like the worst sore loser I think in a chess tournament when I was a kid. Almost got kicked out of a few tournaments actually because of that. Because of my emotional outbursts. It was terrible. So the tournament directors some of the local ones. Another one at PS9 could not stand me, but it's just I was not exactly a teacher's pet when it came to when tournament directors had to deal with the like a competitor, a kid playing. So but so I know what it's like to be a bad apple, in that case. So it just, but again, because I wasn't taught how to process emotions. No one knew, and no one taught me like why I felt more extreme than any other kid. It's like, okay, so because initially I would be shamed. That was the thing. They'd be like, why are you acting this way? Whereas Johnny lost their chess game and they're not having as crazy a ballistic reaction that you are having, but they don't understand why I would process it to a far more extreme degree, why I felt far worse losing a game than they would.
Yeah.
And for me, it was personal. And a lot of special needs kids that when we were on the Churchill chess team, because that was the special needs school I spent a majority of my schooling years with. We all were like a lot of us, most of us were had very poor reaction to losing. We were sore losers, and even among each other, sometimes in chess club, you had some big arguments that needed to be de-escalated. I remember one kid like would sometimes chess pieces would be thrown at each other or snacks. It's like, okay, if you couldn't find the chess pieces to throw at your opponent, okay, maybe some Doritos or popcorn would do the trick.
Oh my gosh. And how did Churchill handle that? How did they? So you went to Churchill, and even at Churchill, they did not really know how to help students understand their own emotions and to navigate difficult situations of disappointment.
Yeah, that's my only criticism of like I said, I'm very grateful to my school. My school provide amazing they still continue to provide amazing academic support, and they really help you enjoy learning and
Yeah.
becoming very good at school and in life. But yeah, the only if I had only one criticism, and just one criticism, is I just think there needed to be a curriculum on emotional intelligence. I think that would have helped me so much. It would have solved a lot of problems I was dealing with, and because, when you don't deal with something, you don't think it's that important, or you sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And then it just grows up into a bigger problem. But, you know, I just think that it just needs to be a mandatory course. Like, and again, I know it's hard because it's not about this is not a course based on passing or failing. It's not something you should get. I don't think it should be even graded. This is very unique. I don't know. Again, even I'm like sometimes like confused as that. Well, how would I go about promoting such a course? Like, should it be pass fail? Should it be, or should it just be like mandatory where it's like you, or just like something where you just kind of a course on insight, like, but you have to take it. It has to be mandatory because it's the only way I think that we have to take an honest look at emotions. It's very important where we confront it. We have to. I always believe in confronting something. I believe that when you pretend something does not exist, it becomes a much bigger problem,
Well,
or it becomes a problem.
it's interesting that you use the word confronting because confronting can be almost too much. But if we create the environment that it's okay to talk about what you're feeling, then it's not a question of confrontation. It's just a question of awareness and bringing it to your attention to process with someone that you feel safe with. So I was going to ask you, now that we're kind of moving towards the end of our interview, how would you organize this curriculum? Like, how many different parts would it have? Not talking about pass fail, but just what would be the most important parts of this type of a curriculum?
Um, it would be the most important parts would be like it's really hard to really kind of break it down specifically, but I think dealing with loss. I think some of the topic. If I have to, I would just start with general topics like how do you deal with loss? Like dealing with negative emotions and like depending on situations or like and then another like topic be like, how can you advocate for yourself without losing your temper completely? That's something that's a life skill even most adults haven't quite mastered yet. I mean, that's why you have so much, for example, road rage.
Yes.
You have adults acting like children all the time in our world. Having emotional blowouts, and a good reason for that is well, they didn't have an emotional intelligence course. They
Yes.
were they were taught that it didn't exist, you didn't need to learn it, or it wasn't a big deal, and that's your problem right there.
Yeah. And when you talk about loss, what kind of loss would you include in that? Some
It,
examples.
well, like well with kids, like kids are very, kids they want they do sports and competitive activities, like having a bad basketball game, and it could be those kind of losses or any competitive events, but it also could be it could be something more heartbreaking like the loss of a loved one, like a grandparent or you know
Mhm.
and because that's about grief. It's like how to grieve effectively, and understanding why loss happens.
Yeah.
It's because kids personalize things, they do. They
Okay.
sometimes they feel that sometimes it's like kind of magical thinking like, oh, I could have stopped that from happening, or kids have this like superhero complex. That's why as kids we loved superheroes because they could come in and save the day. Like when I was a kid, I loved Superman because I feel like he could do all the things I wish I could have done. I want to be like Superman. I don't want to be like myself. I don't want to be, special and me. I want to be Superman, because he could do the things I felt I couldn't be.
I like Batman because of his car. And so this is very interesting what you're saying, because we would, I would imagine that what about social workers? I mean, could they be part of this, or do you think students should be sent to a social worker, or would that add to the idea of if there's something wrong with you, go talk to the social worker, perhaps?
Don't think, and that's the thing. I'm actually not. It shouldn't be a social worker because I just think that it should be somebody who also. It should be a teacher who also like teaches part of the main curriculum. It should be someone who's there, like because then the problem is I think if you use social workers, it's like oh I have to speak to only this person has emotional intelligence and my main instructor doesn't have that. It kind of creates that
Very good point.
disconnect.
Very, very good point. I'm actually right now designing a training called the Well-Tempered Neurosavvy Teacher Nurturing Embodied Learners. And this teacher, what they notice is the state of mind of the student, and that whatever behavior or learning differences that the student has may have deeper roots than just the student doesn't want to do it. And that another important part is that, as you said, students, anybody really, how many of us really have somebody listening to us, being attuned to us, just us, wanting to find out how you're doing or what's on your mind? And if we can create a classroom activity or a time where students can listen to each other, then wouldn't that possibly promote emotional intelligence?
That would be really good too, because students become, humanized. We want to humanize it's all about everyone humanizing each other. It's like you understand, like we're three-dimensional human beings. It just adds that level of awareness to you kind of value yourself and you value other people even better when you have these kind of settings. I think that's a really good idea. Because you kind of realize, oh, this person, also is important. I'm important, they're important. You create deeper friendships that way. If that's the route you want to go with, because kids like they get more comfortable with each other. There's it also that kind of setting also would lead to less bullying. That's the thing, because when students bully others, they do so because they feel that that person's an outsider, like they're not human, they're not as good as me, or they don't deserve to be treated with respect. So you would eliminate a lot of bullying by promoting that kind of kind of learning setting right there.
Right. And the anger that that person is feeling for whatever reason that has turned them into being a bully.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
What would you say about students whose parents may be a source of fear for them, that their experience at home has created a sense of fear that people are not safe? How do you think those types of students could get support in school?
I think, and that's a tough one, because I think I think having inviting the parents, like kind of like just to like kind of come and be sit down in a class one time would be really beneficial to them, because they may understand, like, hey, you know what, I'm the one who also needs to learn emotional intelligence, not just my kids. And then because it lets the parents know, like, hey, you know what, we're not leaving you out of the process. This could be a wonderful learning experience for them too. When we have a like a we kind of, as a summary, like maybe the parents come in once trimester or semester, like, this is what your kid learned in this class. What, and we do a little summary, and then the parent be like, hey, this is interesting. Like, they'll be like, yo, why didn't someone teach me that when I was growing up? And then it may lead to some self reflection, like, you know what, maybe I could act differently in this setting. Like, maybe there's a reason why I'm not getting what I want in certain areas of my life. I think it would be a great, an epiphany for, I think, some of them.
Well, you remind me of how many parents have found out that they have ADHD or that they are on the spectrum as a result of their children being diagnosed first. And then they say, really? Oh, and then they find out that they are also on the spectrum, or they have ADHD, or maybe some learning differences, and then they go and find support. Um, Well, is there anything else you'd like? I mean, I don't get tired speaking to you because you have such a wonderful way of expressing yourself and being vulnerable, for which I applaud you because it takes courage. You're on YouTube and you are helping other young men and parents and young students to use you as an example of someone who went through it and came out so marvelously. And I'm is dedicating himself to promoting an educational system with a new kind of paradigm that provides emotional support right alongside and maybe even as a in tandem to academic performance.
Yes. No, that's very important because like, a lot, learning is far more than just the subject. It's more, learning is about, understanding yourself, understanding how you operate. And, because, the more you know about how you learn and about like how you process information and your state of mind, you know, absorbing information becomes less tiring. It becomes less of a task, and also just becomes more exciting when you really know yourself on a deeper level. And then you feel a greater connection to what you're learning. You feel like it's part of you, like you embrace it as something of your own, not as something that's forced on you. And that's really the key here, to a lot of things.
Yes, and we are multidisciplinary and studying ourselves or each other involves the four parts of the core curriculum and more, right? It can be interdisciplinary, multisensory. I mean, it's our anatomy, our nervous system, our emotions, our cognitive abilities. I mean, there's so many parts of ourselves that when we study it, it's really applied learning with the benefit of then also understanding ourselves and maybe even creating a menu of wellness, what makes us feel good, and have permission to enjoy ourselves and have fun. And when we have fun and enjoy ourselves, then we have the hormones that support the learning, the joy, and greater capacity to access our memory, to be curious, to connect with other people.
Yeah. No, it's very important, just again, it's all about making learning more of an intimate endeavor, it's just really something special, and that's the thing. It just makes life just far more interesting, far more extraordinary, and it just like, you know, it's an art, learning is an art. It's an art form, it's creativity, it's and tapping into that, I think tapping into the emotional life of a student will just unleash like so much that's just right under the surface. And again, I think kids could, it, who knows, it may get to a point where a kid may enjoy learning something as much as they would enjoy watching their favorite TV show. Because when I study chess, for example, I feel like I'm watching my favorite TV show. I don't see it as, work. I see it as an experience. And I just hope that every kid feels that they can have that experience by learning something new.
Awesome. Well, Fabio, I can't thank you enough for your time to have four video interviews with me with so much valuable information. And you and I will be in touch. And maybe you'll teach me some chess. I'll see you at that cafe.
Thanks a lot for having me. This was a very this was a great experience for me. Actually, I just like it, I whenever I'm able to go back in the past and just kind of make sense of it, it's just really something that I truly enjoy. So thanks for taking me on a little detour back in time.
Okay, take good care.
All right, have a good one.